Philip to Evelyn, November 29th, 1943. A day to remember. My dearest, last night I was awakened from a nap to find 5 lovely letters and a V-mail from you. It was too late after I read them through a few times to do anything about answering them then. This is the first opportunity I have had to do so. You may have noticed that I'm single spacing instead of double spacing as per usual. This only means one thing. I mean to say plenty. I read your letters in the order of their dates. The first one is November 4th. I was very pleasantly relaxed as I perused the first few paragraphs, which describes the impromptu visit of Dvorsha, Etta, Nat, Lena and Bob, and Tante Bosch. I fairly glowed with pride when I read of the favorable comment inspired by our apparently remarkable little daughter. Imagine my chagrin then, when I started to read the next paragraph, only to have my beatific mood shattered by your unexpected fusillade of outraged criticism of my, quote, disgusting, unquote, behavior during my last trip to London. My first reaction was consternation, only natural when I discover suddenly that something I have done, quote, formed a disgusting image in your mind, end quote. However, when my first astonishment had worn off and I could think the matter over a little more dispassionately, I was first resentful and then indignant. I am still indignant and not a little disappointed in you, Chippy. My indignation rises from the fact that you presume to judge me. In a matter where my conscience is clear, this attitude which you choose to take is to my mind entirely unjustified and entirely without foundation. The simple and unadulterated fact that I indulged to the extent of 6 short shots of whiskey, which did me more good than harm and injured no one, not even you, and which were imbibed in the spirit of good fellowship and conviviality, does not, it is my earnest conviction, call for comment, let alone invective, on the part of my ever-loving and understanding spouse. Up to now, and I've been inordinately proud of the fact, I have considered myself a model of exemplary husbandly behavior, and with good reason, as I can get anyone who knows me to testify. For anyone, most especially you, to attempt to disparage my pride in what is considered a rarity, quote, over here, unquote, namely being a faithful husband, is most discouraging, to put it mildly as I know how. Not that I'm soliciting any pat on the back for what, at best, is a thankless accomplishment, but neither do I intend to remain silent when my honor, I consider it as such, has been impeached. I disdain to defend what you choose to call my, quote, disgusting, unquote, behavior, for the simple reason that I don't see it in the same light. Finally and flatly, if I ever consider any action on my part to be, quote, right, end quote, and you of all people should know that I wouldn't, for any consideration, do anything I considered, quote, wrong, end quote, and in all good faith tell you all about it, I certainly don't expect you to sit in judgment on me and my wholly imaginary peccadillos. I am not even a little bit ashamed of my, quote, misdemeanor, end quote. I am only surprised and hurt that you choose to regard it as such. Then, in the very next sentence, you are unkind enough to add injury to insult. Honestly, Chippy, so bitter was the tone of sarcastic reference to my failure to write a, quote, longie, end quote, on the spot, that I reread the sentence twice to make sure my eyes were seeing aright. You seem to think, no, you unmistakably take the attitude that the longie in question is of the most prime and paramount importance, and that my own activities, I hope you hold no brief that I insist they were deserving of no harsher title, were a secondary consideration. You have the unmitigated gall pardon me while I burn, to imply that I failed in my duty to you when I was, quote, unfeeling, end quote, enough to go out and have a good time rather than take time out from my, quote, round of pleasure, end quote, to write to you. Perhaps you don't believe you suggested any such thing. What does this sound like? Permit me to quote, how would you like it if I went out every night indeed, got almost drunk and couldn't find time to write, end quote. In all truth now, honey, did you honestly expect me to answer that question, which at best has no basis in truth, and at worst is as inane as it is ambiguous? Do you by any chance wish to persist in your notion that I willfully ignored you in order to cater to my own pleasures? Even if it did look very much like that, you should have had sufficient faith in my sense of the fitness of things to justify to yourself my seemingly disgraceful neglect of you. I hope the longy, which I sent off, page 2, within a day after my return, and which must have reached you soon after the letter that caused your outburst, caused you some pangs of conscience for jumping to wrong conclusions and creating an atmosphere of dissension between us. Ever since I first met you, Chippy, I have leaned over backwards to prevent any altercation whatever between us. I regret exceedingly that you were unthinking enough to provoke one where none had need exist. Much more, however, do I deplore your lack of faith in me, feeling deep down that I have never given you any cause whatever to doubt my purity of motives, nor the honesty of my intentions, nor even the decorum of my behavior. In the future, I'll thank you to trust me to do nothing to dishonor neither myself, nor you, nor all those who do have faith in me. As to your lamentation that it's over 6 weeks since I even went to a movie, I can only say it's regrettable, and I'm sorry if you found yourself unable or unwilling to take in an occasional movie. But am I going to help either you or myself by abstaining from even this innocent pastime? God knows this is my greatest vice, and I can't for the life of me conceive of your denying me the right to do this indulgence. Then why, sweet, do you flay me with this fact? Did you intend to make me feel guilty? If so, I'm afraid you failed of your purpose, because I just can't, by any stretch of the imagination, bring myself to believe that I am responsible for your failure to go to the movies. I'm positive I never intended you to deny yourself the pleasure for the sake of writing me a letter. If you are laboring under any such delusion, permit me to enlighten you. I wouldn't for the world have you deny yourself anything on my account. Believe that, darling, nor would I dream of holding anything of the kind against you. This also comes under the heading of what I am pleased to call, quote, the fitness of things, unquote. You decry the fact that you only received, quote, one skimpy letter in a whole week, end quote. I'm truly sorry that was so, Chippy, but I resent your implication that I was at fault in the matter. Here again, your regrettable lack of faith in me shows up. Am I responsible for the dereliction of the postal authorities too? I deplore heartily the necessity for plying you with all these assurances, but your charges of instability, to give it a nice word, on my part, permit me no other course than to defend myself. Therefore, I give you my solemn word, or do you doubt that too, that never since I have been in the army have I permitted more than 2 days to intervene between my letters to you. And if you have ever had cause to believe I failed you in this respect, then yours is the fault for even doubting me, not mine. My conscience is clear on that score, and for that matter, on any score. It suddenly occurs to me that I have had reason before to call you to task for your lack of faith in a husband who adores you beyond all reason, and never that he can recall gave you cause to doubt his devotion to you. Surely he deserves some measure of faith for his constancy. At least he is undeserving of your displeasure. This is the most difficult letter I have ever forced myself to write, my darling, and I would gladly have saved myself the trouble were it not for the necessity of bringing out into the open any resentment that we may feel toward each other. To my mind, it is the only way to complete understanding and sympathy and appreciation between us. If, in trying to justify myself in your eyes, I have found it expedient to, quote, tread on your toes, end quote, put it down to a human failing that is instinctive in all of us, the desire, rather the instinct to hit back at the one who hurts us. And I won't try to pretend that you didn't hurt me. You did. It all boils down to this, my sweet. I love you very dearly, and the mere thought that you can believe anything but good of me is intolerable. That is why I must write a letter in the above vein, to keep you believing in my goodness, my fidelity, and above all, my honesty. If that last rings of conceit, then conceit is an integral factor in living up to an ideal. In conclusion, on the above, I want you to know that my behavior has, page 3, always been and will continue to be in my own keeping. And I assure you there is no better chaperone in that respect than myself. Thus, if I mention in a few days from now, when I go on past to London, that I had a few drinks, I'll expect you to read it and think no more of it. You say in your much discussed letter that if I have to drink, you know better than that, not to mention it to you. Is this the same Chippy who insisted not too long ago that everything between us be open and above board? It certainly doesn't sound like the old Chippy, and more than anything else in this world, I want to come back to my old Chippy, not a squeamish, intolerant facsimile of the same. That, my own, is your duty to me, and I don't think either of us would like it if you failed in that duty. So, as I said, and I could sulk and refuse to tell you anything, as you have made it reasonable for me to do, if I do drink, I don't say I will, mind you. I won't have any qualms whatever about letting you know it, because I know you'll know that I wouldn't do it if it were in any way wrong. I don't feel we'll ever have any trouble on that score again, ever. Am I right? The remainder of your letters, fortunately, were bright and cheerful and almost entirely dissipated the black mood the first letter put me in. They covered all the dates from November 4th to the 12th. The V-mail was dated 18th and 19th. I am distressed by the fact that although I know now that Eddie is in England, I don't have his address because a previous letter has been held up or lost. I was under the impression that he had my address. Why hasn't he, page 4, contacted me? Incidentally, I only received 2 letters from you in 9 days, yet it didn't occur to me for a moment that you had failed to write daily. I merely cursed the source of the trouble, the postal authorities. Take a lesson from one who has faith in his other half. Your descriptions of our adorable cherub are, as usual, a source of never-ending delight to me. Further, since today is her birthday, I think it is no more than fair to devote the remaining space to her. My darling Adele, this is the first letter your dad has ever addressed to you. The very significance of this fact is poignantly thrilling to me, and so hungry am I for the sight of you and for the feeling of your infant softness in my arms that I choke up at the very contemplation. Happy birthday, my dear little one. May the next happy birthday find me by your side, so that I may actually hold you close to my heart that loves you so. Your mommy, who also lives in my heart, tells me that you have learned to kiss my picture. That little one is just about the nicest thing that ever happened to your daddy. If the cold, inanimate features of the picture are not properly responsive to your caresses, pretend not to notice it, 'cause someday soon, I pray, those very same features that are so immovable now will light up at the sight of you. Those very arms will hold you, oh so close, to that very breast. Your every caress will be returned 1,000-fold. Your daddy promises it. Kiss mommy for me, darling. Give her my share of your love for the time being. I am, as always, your loving daddy, Phil.